I moved into that neighborhood in 2018 because it was all I could afford near downtown Baltimore. I had a job that paid just enough to keep me stuck in the middle, not poor enough for help, not stable enough for anything decent. The block sat between two busier streets, a short stretch of row houses that looked intact from a distance. Red brick, narrow stoops, iron railings rusted at the joints. During the day it felt normal. People came and went. Cars passed through without slowing. Kids walked to the corner store and back. At night, the block changed. The first evening I noticed it, I was unpacking boxes in the front room. The sun dropped fast behind the buildings, and the streetlights flickered on. Almost every house lit up at once, not fully, but room by room. A light in a second-floor window across the street turned on, then off, then on again. A porch light 3 doors down blinked twice and stayed dark. I assumed faulty wiring or people moving around. Later, around midnight, I went to the window. Every stoop had someone sitting on it. Men and women wrapped in jackets, sitting still, hands folded or resting on knees. No phones, no talking, faces angled toward the end of the street. They did not look drunk. They did not look high. They looked alert in a tired way, eyes fixed forward. At the far end of the block, where the street should have continued, there was nothing. Just an empty lot sealed with a slab of concrete. No fence, no sign. The concrete was lighter than the sidewalk, smooth and flat, sloping slightly toward a drain. Even from a distance, I could smell it. That sharp, wet scent of fresh pour. It did not fade over time. It stayed strong through summer heat and fall rain. My roommate said it was drugs. People keeping watch, signals through lights and doors. That explanation fit the city I thought I knew. I accepted it at first. It was easier than questioning why no one slept. Over the next weeks, patterns emerged. Lights flicked on and off in sequences that repeated. 3 short flashes from a basement window. 1 long glow from a kitchen light. Porch lights that came on for exactly 30 seconds, then shut off. Doors opened and closed without anyone stepping out, just a quick check of the street, then shut again. The timing was too clean to be random. The people on the stoops stayed there all night. They shifted positions but never left. When dawn came, they stood up almost together and went inside. By morning, the block looked empty again. I started paying attention to the empty lot. During the day, it looked wrong. The concrete had hairline cracks that never grew. Patches looked darker, as if moisture sat beneath the surface. A faint shimmer rose from it in the heat, even when the rest of the street stayed dull. Trucks never parked near it. No one walked across it. Trash blew around it but never settled on top. I checked city records online out of curiosity. The lot had addresses attached to it decades earlier. 3 row houses once stood there. They were marked as demolished after a fire. The date listed was recent, but no news articles matched. No permits showed full demolition details. The records stopped short like something unfinished. One afternoon, I watched a city crew work near the lot. They did not break the concrete. They drilled small holes and inserted probes, then sealed them again. No signs went up. The crew left before sunset. That night, the block stayed more active than usual. Lights flashed more often. More doors opened. More people sat outside, shoulders tense. The smell from the concrete grew stronger. I walked the block during the day to look for clues. Many houses had small vents near their foundations that pointed toward the street. Some vents were newer, clean metal bolted into old brick. Others were patched with fresh mortar. I noticed thin cracks in the sidewalk that led toward the empty lot, lines that did not match the age of the pavement. At night, I watched more closely. The people on the stoops were not watching nothing. They were watching for changes, for movement on the concrete, for something subtle I could not see yet. One night, rain fell hard. Water pooled at the end of the street, then drained faster than it should have. Steam rose from the concrete afterward, even as the air cooled. The smell sharpened, almost chemical. I started sleeping poorly. Even with curtains closed, light flashed through gaps. Doors thumped shut at odd hours. The sense of waiting filled the room. Not fear exactly, vigilance. I went back to the records and looked deeper into infrastructure reports. That was where things lined up. The block sat above an old utility corridor, a mix of gas lines, steam pipes, and outdated sewer runs from a time when the city layered systems without removing old ones. Years earlier, a rupture had occurred under those houses at the end of the block. Not an explosion, but a slow failure. Heat, pressure, gas seepage. The fire that took the houses was listed as electrical, but follow-up reports mentioned ground instability and persistent leaks. The houses were torn down fast. The concrete cap was poured thicker than standard, reinforced, meant to seal what lay beneath. It was not just a slab. It was a containment measure. The smell came from sealant compounds used to trap gas and vapor. They were reapplied over time, which kept the scent fresh. The hairline cracks never grew because the slab was monitored and maintained quietly. The probes drilled by the city crew measured pressure, heat, and gas levels. The block knew because they had lived through it. They knew that changes happened at night, when temperature shifts increased pressure underground. They knew the signs. Flickering lights meant power fluctuations from underground heat. Doors opening meant checks for smell, for vibration, for sound. People on stoops meant eyes on the concrete, ready to react if something changed. They did not sleep because sleep meant missing the early signs. Sleep meant trusting systems that had failed once already. I noticed it the night it almost went wrong again. The lights flicked faster, less orderly. More doors opened at once. People stood instead of sitting. Someone brought out a bucket of water and poured it along the curb near the lot, watching how it flowed. Steam rose stronger than before. The smell burned my nose. City trucks arrived without sirens. Workers moved fast and quiet. More sealant was applied. The slab darkened, then lightened again as it cured. By morning, the block relaxed. People slept late that day. Curtains stayed drawn. After that, I understood. The neighborhood was not haunted. It was managing a risk that the city never fully removed. The residents had built their own system of watching because official oversight came only when numbers crossed a threshold. I moved out when my lease ended. I could not live with that level of constant attention. On my last night, I stood on the stoop and watched the end of the street with them. The concrete sat still. The smell lingered. The lights followed their pattern. What stayed with me was how normal it had become to them. How a whole block adjusted their lives around a sealed danger, choosing awareness over rest. The empty lot was not empty. It held the reason no one slept, locked under concrete that needed eyes on it every night. I ended up in that neighborhood in late October 2014 because I was delivering replacement routers for a local internet provider. I was 27, working contract jobs, driving my own truck, paid per stop. That morning started normal. Cold air, clear sky, dry pine smell as I climbed out of Flagstaff. The work order listed a new subdivision outside town, still under development. It showed 6 installs, all marked as quick swaps. The map pin floated without a street name, but that happened often with new builds, so I trusted the GPS. The turnoff came sooner than expected. A paved road without a sign peeled away from the highway. The asphalt looked new but dull, as if it had already sat through years of sun. No shoulder, no reflectors. My GPS recalculated twice within the first mile. The road curved too sharply for the speed limit it posted. I slowed, watching the pine trees thin out into scrub and juniper. The houses appeared all at once, not staggered like most developments. They sat evenly spaced, identical shapes with slight changes in paint tone. Beige, gray, faded green. Every driveway was empty. No tire marks, no mail trucks, no trash bins by the curb, no porch lights, even though clouds were rolling in. I parked at the address listed first. The house looked lived in, curtains drawn, a welcome mat placed straight. A wind chime hung from the porch beam but did not move. The air felt still. I grabbed a router and my signal meter. The meter chirped once, then settled low, as expected this far out. I scanned the front wall, the window, the porch post. Weak signal. I walked around the side yard. Still weak. I noted it on my phone and moved on. The second and third houses felt the same. Lived in but paused. No noise from inside. No dogs. No TVs. No smoke from vents. Each house had tire tracks that stopped short of the garage doors, as if vehicles had been rolled in once and never again. At the fourth house, my signal meter jumped without warning. Full bars, stronger than anything I had seen that far from town. I checked my phone. No cell service. The meter did not care. Stayed high. I followed the spike down the street. That was when I noticed the house set farther back. It did not match the layout of the others. The driveway curved through juniper trees and vanished behind them. The house itself sat lower, closer to the earth, like it had been pressed down. Its windows were tall and narrow. The roofline dipped unevenly. It was not on my work order. As I stepped closer, the meter climbed higher. The needle pressed against its stop. I felt heat through my gloves where I held it, not burning, just warm, like electronics after long use. I stood near the trees and scanned. The reading stayed strong no matter where I pointed it, but it peaked at the front window. The curtains were thin, off-white, pulled tight. Behind them, something moved. Not fast, not sudden. Tall shapes shifting from one side to the other. The movement reached near the top of the window frame. It did not match a person standing close. It felt like someone walking farther back, passing behind furniture or partitions. I told myself it was a trick of light, shadows from trees, the angle of the glass. I did not step onto the porch. The boards looked solid, but the steps had worn edges, smoothed by use. I circled the house instead. The ground was hard, packed dirt with no weeds. The back wall had a metal service panel that did not match residential installs. It was industrial, sealed with heavy bolts. A cable ran from it into the ground, thick and shielded. That explained the signal. Someone had installed a private relay or amplifier. That kind of hardware required permits. It also required power. There were no visible power lines feeding the house. No solar panels. No generator sound. The meter still screamed. As I walked along the rear wall, the movement inside continued. I could see it through gaps in the curtains. Stayed consistent, slow, measured. The height never changed. I did not feel watched, but I felt counted, like my presence was being tracked by routine rather than interest. I checked the time on my phone. No signal, but the clock read 11:40 a.m. I had arrived in the neighborhood around 11 o'clock. That matched my memory. I decided to finish the last listed address and leave. As I walked back to my truck, I noticed something else. The houses I had already checked looked farther away than before. The street felt longer, the curve deeper. The sky had darkened more than it should have in less than an hour. At the final listed house, the meter dropped to nothing. I scanned every wall. No spike, no response. I noted it and returned to my truck. When I started the engine, the dashboard clock blinked and reset. That happened when the battery connection was loose. I tapped the dash. The clock came back showing 1:17 p.m. I sat there longer than I should have, doing the math. I checked my phone again. Still no service. The GPS showed me inside the subdivision, but the map had shifted. The road behind me was gone, replaced by an empty grid. I drove anyway. As I rolled past the deeper house, the meter on the passenger seat flared to life without being touched. The needle rattled against its limit. The curtains moved again. This time the shape paused near the window, elongated, then drifted back. I kept driving. The road did not feel straight. The turns seemed sharper. I focused on the pavement edge, on keeping the speed steady. I reached the highway at 1:34 p.m. My phone buzzed as service returned. 3 missed calls from dispatch. A text asking why my truck had been stationary for over 2 hours. According to the vehicle tracker, I had entered the subdivision at 10:58 and exited at 1:31. I pulled over and checked my notes. I had written timestamps by habit. They showed a span of 40 minutes. Back at the office, I filed the report. I noted the signal anomaly and the unlisted structure. I did not mention the movement. The supervisor flagged the address. He told me the subdivision had stalled due to zoning issues and lawsuits. The deeper house did not appear in county records. The equipment I described matched a private data relay used by defense contractors and research groups testing rural coverage. Those sites often operated under shell permits and limited disclosure. A week later, another tech was sent out with a survey team. They could not find the road. The turnoff was there, but it led to graded dirt and survey stakes, no pavement. The GPS pin floated again, then settled miles away. The vehicle tracker showed no signal loss. My truck was inspected. The clock battery was replaced. The meter was tested and passed. I drove that highway many times after. I never saw the turnoff again. What stayed with me was not fear. It was the sense of infrastructure built ahead of people, routines running without residents, systems active without a surface reason. The movement behind the curtains fit that idea. Not something watching, but something working. The time loss fit stress, faulty clocks, and interference from powerful transmitters. All of it had explanations that did not need anything unreal. I quit that contract 2 months later. I still deliver equipment sometimes, but I avoid unmarked roads and unfinished neighborhoods. When a signal meter spikes where it should not, I log it and leave. I learned that some places are not meant for service calls. They exist to support processes that do not need visitors, only distance and quiet. I went to that neighborhood in June 2019 to help my older sister move into a short-term rental after her divorce. She needed an extra set of hands and someone to stay the first week. The rental was meant to be temporary, just a quiet place while custody schedules settled. The cul-de-sac sat outside a small town in western Ohio, flat land, soy fields close enough to smell when the wind shifted. The houses curved around a small circle of asphalt. Every mailbox matched. Every lawn looked trimmed by the same crew. The place felt maintained, not cared for. When we pulled in with the rented van, I noticed how still it was. No kids on bikes, no dogs, no cars parked on the street. Curtains moved, though. I saw them shift and settle as we unloaded. People knew when we arrived. That was clear. The air felt alert, like a room that had been holding its breath. The house itself was clean and plain. Beige siding, white trim. Inside smelled like new paint and lemon cleaner. The rental company had stripped it of anything personal. No photos, no rags. It made the place echo even with furniture inside. I stayed in the spare room, mattress on a metal frame, blinds that never quite closed. That first evening I walked the circle to stretch my legs. The sidewalks were smooth, recently poured. I counted cameras without meaning to. One above a garage, one under an eave, another mounted on a fence post. They were everywhere. At first I thought it was just people being cautious. Then I noticed none of them pointed toward the street. Not a single lens covered the road or the sidewalks. Every camera angled inward, toward neighboring houses, backyards, side yards, the small gaps between homes. It made no sense for crime prevention. It made sense for watching people. Over the next few days, patterns formed. The neighbors were polite in the way people are when they already know things about you. They nodded. They smiled. They watched. Every time we left, someone stepped out to water grass that did not need water. Every time we came back, garage doors across the circle opened and closed, one after another, like blinks. At night, porch lights went off within minutes of hours. When we stayed up, the cul-de-sac stayed awake. I began to notice that most cameras angled toward our rental. Some were adjusted during the day, small shifts, careful changes. I saw a man on a ladder across the circle, turning a mount a few degrees. After that, a camera that once watched a driveway watched our front door instead. I took photos on my phone, not because I planned to report anything, but because I wanted proof that I was not imagining it. Inside the house, my sister tried to act normal. She unpacked boxes. She sorted mail. She cleaned a place that was already clean. Her divorce had been ugly, but quiet. No shouting matches in public. No police visits. She said the rental came recommended by a legal aid office that helped with short-term housing. She said it was safe. The mail started on the third day. It was not the usual stack of ads and utility notices. It was a thick envelope with her name printed cleanly. No return address. It had been shoved through the slot with force, bending the edge. There was no stamp, no postmark. Inside were copies of court documents related to her divorce, filings that had not been finalized yet. Some pages had handwritten notes in the margins, dates circled, times underlined. It felt like someone had been tracking the case closely and wanted her to know it. I checked the exterior cameras on the house. The rental had one, a small unit near the door. It showed no delivery. The timestamp showed nothing unusual. No one approached the door during the window when the envelope appeared. The slot itself faced inward toward the circle, visible from at least 3 neighboring houses. That night I slept lightly. I woke to small sounds, not footsteps, but movement. Garage doors, car starting then stopping, the glow of screens across the circle. I stood at the spare room window and watched the cameras. Tiny red lights pulsed. Some lenses adjusted, small motors whining. They tracked the house, not me, not the street. The house. Over the week, more envelopes arrived. Some slid under the door. Some appeared in the mailbox, again without stamps. Each contained more paperwork, custody schedules, requests for continuance, a notice about a missed filing that had not been missed. Someone was interfering with the process, not directly, but enough to create pressure, enough to make mistakes more likely. I drove to the county clerk's office on the 5th day. I did not tell my sister. I asked about service records for her case. The clerk confirmed that several documents had been attempted for service and marked as refused. The address on file matched the rental. According to the record, someone had signed for certified mail, then claimed it was the wrong recipient. That delayed deadlines. That created issues. When I returned, I watched the circle with new eyes. I noticed which houses had multiple cameras. I noticed which driveways had cars that never left. I noticed how often certain garage doors opened at odd hours. This was not random. It was coordinated. I did some digging online. The neighborhood association had a private forum. Took little effort to find cached pages. The posts were not public, but fragments remained. I saw references to a community safety initiative. I saw talk of a temporary resident with legal issues. I saw phrases about protecting property values and keeping the circle clean. Someone had shared court dates. Someone had shared copies of filings. Someone had suggested documenting activity to help an interested party. The interested party became clear when I cross-referenced names. A neighbor across the circle shared a last name with my sister's ex-husband. Not the same person, but a cousin. The ex had grown up in the area. He had left years ago. His family had not. The cameras were not for crime. They were for compliance. The neighbors were not watching everyone. They were watching one house. They were watching for missed deadlines, for violations of temporary orders, for any slip that could be documented and fed back into the case. They were controlling the flow of information by intercepting mail. They were creating a record without ever stepping inside. I confronted no one. I did not knock on doors. I documented everything instead. I photographed camera angles. I saved forum caches. I requested service logs. I spoke to the clerk again. I contacted my sister's attorney and handed over a file that explained the delays, the refused mail, the pattern of surveillance. It was all legal on the surface and rotten underneath. We left early the next morning. We did not pack quietly. We did not try to hide. As we loaded the van, cameras adjusted again. Lenses followed the boxes. Garage doors opened. People stood just inside, watching through glass. The attorney filed a motion that same week. The judge ordered all future service to go through the attorney's office only. The court flagged the interference. A separate complaint went to the county about unlawful surveillance and mail tampering. An investigation followed. The neighborhood forum went dark. Cameras began to disappear. Mounts remained, pale outlines on siding where hardware had been removed. My sister moved into a different place 2 towns over. The case settled months later. Custody remained shared. The delays stopped. The pressure lifted. I drove past that cul-de-sac once more that fall. The lawns still looked trimmed. The mailboxes still matched. The circle still felt held together by quiet rules. Most of the cameras were gone, but not all. A few remained, pointed inward, waiting for the next reason to turn. I moved into that neighborhood in March 2021 because rent was cheap and close to my warehouse job in South Tucson. I worked swing shifts loading freight, long hours, sore back, no energy to be picky. The place was a ground floor unit in a narrow street tucked between an old rail spur and a line of storage yards. The buildings were low and tired, paint peeled in white flakes. Streetlights were spaced too far apart, leaving long stretches of shadow. After 9 p.m., the street went quiet in a way that felt planned, not natural. During the day, it looked harmless. A few parked cars, faded numbers on doors, wind pushing trash against chain-link fences. At night, it felt sealed. Sound dropped off. Even the traffic from the main road a few blocks away faded. The darkness felt thick, pressed down close to the pavement. My bedroom window faced the street. The glass was old and slightly warped, set low enough that headlights flashed straight across my pillow when someone drove by. I kept the blinds half closed, more for light than privacy. From my bed, I could see a strip of sidewalk and the base of the streetlight across the road. The first night I noticed him, I was half asleep. My shift had ended late, and I crashed without dinner. At 2:17 a.m., I woke to the sound of breathing, not inside the room, outside, slow and heavy, like someone climbing stairs. I lay still, listening. Footsteps followed, steady, measured. A shadow crossed the slice of light under the blind. I opened my eyes fully and watched the sidewalk. A man walked past the window. He moved at the same pace people use when they count steps. He did not drag his feet. He did not hurry. His shoulders were square. His head stayed level. His breathing matched his stride. He wore clean clothes, dark jacket, light shirt, pants with a crease that caught the streetlight. His shoes reflected a dull shine. He did not look homeless. He did not scan the street. He did not glance at parked cars. He did not look at other houses. When he reached my window, his head turned, just enough to angle his face toward the glass. Then he kept walking. The next night, it happened again at the same time. I checked my phone when the breathing started. 2:17 a.m. The sound came first, then the steps, then the shadow. Same pace, same clothes, same controlled movement. He turned his head toward my window and continued on. By the fourth night, I knew the time without checking. My body woke before the sound. I waited, heart steady, eyes open. The breathing came right on schedule. I watched him pass. He did not slow. He did not stop. He only looked. I tried to convince myself it was coincidence. A man walking to work. A routine. But the street was empty at that hour. No buses. No open businesses. No foot traffic. And he never looked anywhere else. I tested it by staying up late one night. I left the lights off and lay still, breathing slow, eyes closed. At 2:17 a.m., the steps came closer. I kept my face relaxed and waited. When the sound reached the window, I opened my eyes. He had stopped. He stood inches from the glass. His face hovered in the shadow, close enough that I could see the shape of his nose, the line of his mouth. His breathing filled the small space between us. He did not touch the window. He did not raise a hand. He stood there, still, as if waiting for something to change. I held my breath. My chest burned. The room felt too small. After several seconds, he turned his head away and continued walking, pace unchanged, breathing settling back into rhythm. I did not sleep after that. Over the next week, I paid attention to details. He never varied his route. He always came from the same direction and left the same way. He never crossed the street. He never stepped into the light fully. His face stayed half hidden. His clothes were always clean. No wrinkles, no stains. His shoes stayed polished. I set my phone to record through the blind. The footage showed a shape but no detail. The streetlight flared the lens. His outline blurred. The sound picked up the breathing and footsteps, clear and close. When I zoomed in frame by frame, his face washed out into shadow. I asked the property manager about security. There were no cameras on the street, no patrols, I checked with neighbors during the day, casual questions about noise at night, about foot traffic. No one mentioned a man walking past windows. No one mentioned breathing in the dark. I watched from my window one afternoon as a woman across the street watered plants. I traced the path the man took each night. From her angle, the sidewalk near my window fell into a blind spot between streetlights. Shadows pooled there. From most windows, that stretch of pavement was hidden by parked cars or fence posts. From mine, it was clear. I stayed home on my day off and watched through the night. At 2:17 a.m., he came again. I stood this time just behind the blind, watching through the gap. When he reached my window, he stopped again. His breathing slowed. He leaned closer, close enough that his shadow swallowed the frame. I flipped on the bedroom light. The sudden glare lit the glass. His face reflected faintly, then vanished as he stepped back. He turned away and walked on, pace steady, breathing heavy again. The next morning, I checked the sidewalk. No footprints. The concrete was old and smooth, worn by years of heat and dust. Nothing marked his presence. I called in sick and went to the storage yards behind the street. The rail spur cut through a fenced area with warning signs and motion lights. Inside, a private security company operated night patrols to prevent theft. I watched a guard clock out just after dawn. Clean uniform, polished shoes, controlled posture. His jacket matched the one I had seen in the dark. I looked up the company schedule online. Night patrol routes ran on fixed intervals. One route passed behind my street at 2:10 a.m. Another ended at 2:25 a.m. The guard used a service path that cut close to residential property, just outside the fence line, where the streetlight coverage failed. I requested public records for patrol logs tied to noise complaints in the area. The logs showed a single guard assigned repeatedly to the same route for months. His notes were minimal. Times recorded down to the minute. No incidents reported. I returned home and waited again. At 2:17 a.m. he came. This time I watched him continue past my window without stopping. I had left the bedroom light on. The glass reflected my room clearly. He did not slow. He did not look. The pattern broke after that. Some nights he passed without turning his head. Some nights he did not stop at all. The breathing stayed the same. The pace stayed the same. The attention faded. Weeks later, I learned the guard had been reassigned after a complaint from the storage yard about boundary walking. The route changed. The breathing stopped. The footsteps stopped. The street stayed empty. I moved out at the end of my lease. The cheap rent no longer mattered. I slept better in places with noise, with people, with light that covered the ground evenly. The man had been real. The fear had been real. The reason others could not see him was simple. He walked where only my window had a clear view. He stopped because he knew he was visible there. Once the light exposed him, the habit ended. What stayed with me was not the walking or the breathing. It was the precision. The way routine can turn into fixation without crossing any rule. The way being seen can matter more than being hidden. We went there in August 2012 because my friend's cousin had access to a private neighborhood pool in North Texas. The heat that summer pressed down hard, the kind that made asphalt soften and shoes stick. We were young and restless and bored of public places. The idea of a locked pool behind hedges felt like a secret, something cleaner and quieter than the city pools packed with noise and kids. The neighborhood sat far back from the main road, rows of large homes spaced wide apart. The streets curved without sidewalks, built for cars only. Lawns were trimmed short and watered at night. Every house looked settled, not flashy, just expensive enough to signal permanence. We parked a few blocks away and walked to avoid attention. Even then, it felt like we were being watched, not directly, but through the stillness. No one sat outside. No garage doors opened. The place held itself tight. The pool sat at the center of the neighborhood behind a tall iron gate. Thick hedges wrapped around the entire area, grown high and dense, blocking sight lines and sound. Once inside, the outside world dropped away. The air felt cooler. The cicadas faded. The smell of chlorine hung sharp and clean. The pool lights were on. The water looked dark blue, almost black at the deep end. The concrete deck was spotless. No leaves, no dirt, no insects crushed underfoot. That alone felt strange. August nights in Texas usually came with bugs everywhere. Here there were none. Not a single moth around the lights. Not even gnats. We changed quickly and eased into the water. It was cold. Not refreshing cold, but deep cold, the kind that tightens muscles. It made no sense given the heat and the late hour. Pools usually held warmth after baking all day. This one felt like it had been shaded or fed from somewhere underground. As we swam, another thing became clear. Sound behaved oddly. There was no echo. The splash of arms entering the water fell flat. Laughter felt swallowed before it traveled. Even the sound of water moving against the pool walls seemed muted, as if the hedges absorbed more than noise. We spread out, each of us moving slow, enjoying the quiet. That was when the ripples started. At first, they were small, easy to dismiss. A circle forming near the middle of the pool, spreading outward, then fading. We assumed someone had moved or kicked, but it kept happening in places no one was near. A smooth disturbance, wide and even, not sharp like a splash. The surface would shift, then settle again. I watched closely. I floated on my back, eyes level with the water. The pool lights shimmered. Then a ripple formed 3 feet from my shoulder. I did not move. No one else was close. The ripple spread, touched my arm, then disappeared. I pushed myself upright and scanned the pool. No drains bubbled. No jets ran. The water should have been still. One of us swam toward the steps at the shallow end and stopped suddenly. They froze in place, body stiff. The water around them moved, slow and heavy. Something passed along their leg under the surface. Not a sharp touch, not a brush like hair or fabric. It was broad and smooth, like a wide object sliding past. They climbed out without splashing, movements tight and careful. The rest of us followed, unease spreading fast. Standing on the deck, we felt exposed. The hedges loomed close, tall enough to block any view out. The gate sat closed, the latch visible but far enough away that reaching it felt like a delay we did not want. We stood dripping, watching the pool. The surface settled again, flat and dark. Then another ripple formed, larger this time, starting near the deep end and moving toward the steps. It stopped short and faded. No one suggested getting back in. We left not long after, drying off with towels and dressing quickly. The walk back through the neighborhood felt longer than before. The streetlights buzzed. Houses remained dark. The stillness pressed close again, heavier now that we carried the pool with us in our thoughts. The experience stuck with me. It did not fit neatly into memory as a fun night or a scare. It stayed unresolved. Weeks later, curiosity pushed me to look into the place. I searched property records, old permits, anything tied to the address. What I found came in fragments. The pool had been built in the early 1980s along with the first phase of the neighborhood. Records showed it had been filled in and reopened more than once. Not renovated, filled in with dirt and gravel, then dug out again years later. The reasons listed were vague. Structural concerns, maintenance issues, code updates. Newspaper archives mentioned incidents without detail. Short notices buried deep, references to investigations that closed without charges. One article from the late 80s referenced a child hospitalized after a pool-related accident, name withheld. Another from the early 90s mentioned an adult found unconscious after hours, revived, no explanation given. The Homeowners Association records were harder to find. Some years were missing entirely. Meeting notes stopped abruptly in 1997. After that, only financial summaries remained. No discussions. No votes recorded about the pool. Just line items for maintenance and utilities. I dug deeper into county filings and found reports tied to soil movement and groundwater in the area. The neighborhood had been built over an old drainage path, rerouted decades earlier. Seasonal water pressure caused shifting underground. Engineers had warned about seepage and unstable soil beneath large concrete structures. The pool's design included a secondary overflow channel and an underground holding tank meant to regulate pressure during heavy rain. Over time, that system had been modified, sealed, reopened, and altered again. The records were incomplete, but one inspection noted unexplained water movement unrelated to pumps or usage. Another mentioned temperature inconsistencies linked to groundwater intrusion. The wide, smooth movement under the water began to make sense. Not a creature, not anything alive. A slow surge of displaced water pushing through hidden channels beneath the pool floor, pressing up through expansion joints and seams. A broad movement, strong enough to brush against swimmers, subtle enough to avoid breaking the surface violently. The cold water had an explanation too. Groundwater feeding in from deeper levels, far cooler than surface-heated pool water. The lack of insects came from the constant chemical adjustments required to keep the water clear despite contamination risks. The silence came from the hedges and the way sound dissipated over water without reflective surfaces nearby. The incidents were likely accidents tied to sudden water movement, people caught off balance, pulled under without warning, panicking in a space that gave no clear feedback. Enough to cause injury, enough to scare residents. Not enough or too complicated to explain publicly without admitting fault in construction and oversight. The residents avoided the pool because they knew. They did not talk about it because the story was long and messy and involved legal risk. The pool reopened because it was easier to fix the surface than the ground beneath. That night in August had placed us over a problem that never truly went away, only buried and unburied as needed. The ripples were pressure equalizing. The touch was water forced through narrow paths, carrying weight without shape. Years later, the memory still comes back when I smell chlorine or feel cold water in summer. It was not fear of something unknown that stayed with me. It was the realization that danger can exist without intent, without life, without sound. Just systems built wrong and maintained through silence, waiting for bodies to remind them they were there. I started jogging through that neighborhood in early mornings in spring 2020 because the parks were closed. It was an older residential area near Spokane, Washington, with wide streets and tall maples that arched over the road. The houses were built in the 1950s, low and solid, with shallow porches and carports instead of garages. At that hour, the air was cold and clean, the kind that stings the lungs and makes sound travel farther than it should. I ran the same route every morning. I left my apartment at 5:30 a.m., crossed the arterial before traffic picked up, and cut through that neighborhood to add distance. It was quiet in a way that felt honest. Sprinklers clicked on and off. A single light burned in a kitchen window. No cars moved. The first time I saw her was a few days into the routine. I rounded a corner and slowed without meaning to. An elderly woman stood barefoot in the middle of the road. She wore a long coat that hung loose on her frame and a thin sweater underneath. Her hair was gray and pulled back, not neatly, but with purpose. She held a plastic bag in one hand and reached into it with the other, scattering chunks of raw meat across the asphalt. Crows covered the street, dozens of them. They did not flap or fight. They stepped forward together, heads tilted, eyes fixed on her hands. The sound they made was low and steady, not loud, more like a held breath. The meat hit the ground, but many of the birds ignored it. They stayed close to her feet, watching her face. I slowed to a walk and passed on the far side of the road. She did not look at me. The birds did. Their heads turned as one, tracking my movement. I felt like I had crossed into something that was already in progress. The next morning, she was there again at 5:40 a.m. I checked the time on my watch because the precision bothered me. Same spot, same bag, same motion. She scattered the meat in a loose arc, then stood still while the birds gathered. She did not step away. She did not flinch when they brushed her ankles. Her bare feet stayed planted on the cold pavement. This went on every morning. The timing never changed. The amount of meat did. Some days there were larger pieces, dark and slick. Other days it was smaller scraps. The birds changed too. Some mornings there were fewer. Some mornings there were so many they lined the curbs and spilled into driveways. But their attention stayed on her, not the food. One morning, as I passed, I lifted my hand in a small wave without thinking. It felt rude not to acknowledge her after seeing her so often. She reacted in a way that made my pace falter. She tilted her head to the side, sharp and precise, the same way the nearest crow did. She did not raise her hand. She did not smile. Her eyes stayed on me until I moved past. Then she straightened again. I told myself it was coincidence, a mannerism picked up from years of feeding birds. That explanation fit and I held onto it. I started to notice other details. The street was always clean after she left. No scraps remained. No feathers. The birds dispersed quickly, lifting off together and settling into the trees that lined the block. They did not linger or circle. They followed her as she walked away, staying just above and behind, hopping from branch to branch. I looked into it out of curiosity. Spokane had issues with crows, especially in older neighborhoods with large roosts. Some residents fed them to keep them away from trash. Others worked with wildlife control groups that tracked and relocated flocks. Feeding at the same time every day could be part of a pattern to manage movement. That explanation held until the morning she was not there. I reached the corner at 5:40 a.m. and slowed out of habit. The street was empty. No woman, no bag. The road looked the same as always. Then I noticed the birds. They were there in a perfect circle in the middle of the road. Not clustered, not scattered. A ring evenly spaced, all facing inward. They stood silent, heads angled toward the center of the circle. No meat lay on the ground. The asphalt was bare. I stopped running. The air felt thicker like it does before a storm. I waited for movement at the center of the circle, but nothing happened at first. The birds stayed still. Then something shifted among them. At first I thought it was a trick of light, a shadow stretching as the sun rose. Then I saw the movement was vertical. Something tall stood within the circle, partially hidden by the birds. It bent forward at the waist, then straightened. The bend was wrong. Too deep, too smooth. No person I knew could move that way and stay balanced. I stepped back, heart racing, and watched. The shape moved again, slow and careful, as if adjusting equipment. When it straightened fully, it was taller than any person around it, narrow at the shoulders, long through the torso. The birds did not scatter. They did not react at all. The figure turned slightly. I caught a glimpse of fabric, dull and matte, blending with the early light. Then it stepped back and the illusion broke. Legs appeared where I had not seen them before, unfolding from behind the birds. The bend that had looked impossible made sense once the spacing changed. It was a man wearing climbing stilts. Once I recognized them, everything snapped into place. The extra height, the odd angles, the way the birds stayed calm. He wore protective gear, padded and dark, with straps around his calves and thighs. The stilts lifted him well above the ground, making his movements look distorted when viewed through the ring of crows. He moved carefully, placing each step between birds, not touching them. In his hands he held a long pole with a hook at the end, the kind used to retrieve objects from high places. He adjusted something on the road surface, then stepped back. The crows waited until he finished. Then they broke formation and lifted off together, filling the air with sound. I jogged past, keeping my distance, and glanced back. The man was folding the pole, unstrapping one stilt at a time. A city utility truck sat parked farther down the block, lights off, blending into the curb. Later that day, I searched public notices and city work orders. I found a reference to a wildlife management contract tied to that neighborhood. The elderly woman was listed as a volunteer coordinator. She had been feeding the crows for years to keep them from roosting downtown, training them to gather and disperse on schedule. The meat was bait, but the routine was the real control. The man on stilts was part of a crew that installed and checked deterrent markers embedded in the road. Low-profile devices that emitted sound and vibration just below human hearing, used to shift roosting behavior. They had to be adjusted when the woman was unavailable. The stilts kept his scent and movement above the birds, reducing stress and scatter during maintenance. The woman had missed that morning because she had been hospitalized. The birds came anyway because the schedule mattered more than the feeder. They waited for the signal they understood. I changed my route after that. Not because I believed something unnatural had happened, but because I had seen how easily a scene could look wrong when viewed without context. The image of that perfect circle stayed with me. The way routine can train living things to wait, to watch, to follow shapes and movements instead of food. Even now, when I run early, I pay attention to patterns. The hour, the spacing, the way people and animals learn each other's habits. What unsettled me was not the woman or the birds or the man on stilts. It was how close I came to mistaking planning for something else, and how little effort it took for a street to feel watched. We went there in September 2010 because my family had just moved into military housing near Fayetteville, North Carolina. My father had been reassigned, and base housing was the fastest option. The neighborhood sat just outside the installation fence, rows of identical duplexes arranged around shared green spaces. Everything looked new but tired at the same time, like it had been rebuilt too many times in the same shape. Behind our row of houses was a playground. It looked brand new. Bright plastic slides, clean metal swing frames, rubber mulch that still smelled faintly of chemicals and heat. The equipment had no rust, no fading, no graffiti. It looked like a brochure image dropped into the woods. No one used it. During the day, the area stayed empty. Parents walked dogs along the paths but steered wide of the play area. Kids rode bikes on the sidewalks and turned around before reaching it. Even on weekends, when families were home, the swings never moved. The silence stood out. Playgrounds usually carry sound even when empty. Chains clink. Plastic creaks as it cools. This one stayed still, like it had never learned how to be used. My brother noticed things before I did. He was younger, still alert to patterns adults ignore. He said he heard children laughing at night. He said it came from the playground after dark. Faint but clear. I told him it was the wind or voices carrying from somewhere else. The houses were close together. Sound traveled. He kept insisting. One morning, after a night of rain, I walked past the playground on the way to the bus stop. The rubber mulch was damp and dark. Around the swing set, footprints marked the surface. Small footprints, barefoot. They circled the swings in uneven loops, overlapping, pressed deep enough to show toes and arches. They did not lead in from the path. They did not lead out. They only circled. I stood there longer than I should have, staring at the ground. The prints were fresh. The rain had stopped hours before dawn. No animals made marks like that. Dogs left claw impressions. Raccoons left paired prints. These were human. I checked again that afternoon. The footprints were gone, smoothed over, like someone had raked the surface. The swings still did not move. A faded sign stood at the edge of the playground, bolted to a wooden post. I had seen it before without reading it. That time I stopped. The paint had peeled. The letters were uneven, hand-stenciled long ago. No children allowed outside after sunset. There was no reason given. No logo. No authority listed. Just the rule. I asked my parents about it. They said base housing had odd rules sometimes. Safety measures, curfews. They told us to follow posted signs and not worry about it. The laughter continued. Not every night. Not loud. It drifted through open windows, thin and brief, like someone exhaling through a smile. It always stopped before midnight. The footprints appeared again a week later, this time around the slide. Small feet, bare. The pattern was the same. Circling. No entry. No exit. By then I was paying attention to the neighborhood. I noticed how porch lights went on early and stayed on all night. How curtains closed before sunset, even in summer heat. How parents called their kids inside long before dark without raising their voices. No one argued. No one lingered. I noticed the houses closest to the playground had reinforced fences and motion lights aimed inward, toward their own yards, not outward. I noticed cameras mounted under eaves, old models, wired, not decorative. One evening I stayed up late on purpose. I sat by the window that faced the playground. The sun went down. The neighborhood settled. Porch lights came on. Windows went dark. Around 9 p.m., movement started. The swings moved first. Not swinging high, just a slow back and forth, barely enough to catch light. Then the slide ladder creaked, metal under small weight. I leaned closer to the glass, careful not to make noise. Figures moved through the dark, low to the ground, too small to be teenagers. They ran in short bursts, stopping often. They never crossed into the light. They stayed within the shadow of the trees and equipment. I could not see faces. I could see limbs, thin arms, small legs, bare skin catching faint light. No shoes, no clothes that reflected. I expected fear. What I felt was something closer to recognition, like realizing I had been wrong about a place I thought I understood. The next morning, the footprints were everywhere, around every piece of equipment, overlapping, pressed deep. Then by afternoon, they were gone again. The explanation came slowly, not from one source but from pieces. I found out the housing area had been rebuilt years earlier. The original units dated back decades, built quickly during a different cycle of deployment. The playground had existed then too, older, simpler. Records showed several incidents involving children after dark. Not crimes, accidents, wandering, injuries that happened in places meant to be safe. There had been a pattern. Children from different families, different houses, drawn to the same spot after sunset. Parents said the kids talked about friends they met there, games they played, paths they followed. The military response had been practical, not public. The playground was removed, then later replaced with a new one, closer to updated safety standards, better lighting, softer ground. The rule stayed: no children outside after sunset. The enforcement never needed to be formal. Families were briefed quietly. New arrivals were told it was for safety. Older residents watched and corrected behavior without confrontation. Over time, the habit set in. What no one talked about was what happened when the rule was broken. I learned that some of the children in the neighborhood were on the autism spectrum, others had sleep disorders, others were dealing with the stress of deployments and constant relocation. They wandered at night. They moved silently. They followed routines that made sense only to them. The playground became a meeting point, not because it was inviting, but because it was familiar. A structure that stayed the same when everything else changed. At night, when supervision dropped and houses went quiet, those children slipped out and gathered. The laughter was real. The footprints were real. The reason no one enforced the rule was because enforcement failed before. Locks were installed. Alarms were added. They did not stop the behavior. What worked was community pressure and quiet monitoring. Parents took turns watching from windows. Motion lights discouraged movement beyond certain zones. Cameras tracked patterns. The playground stayed unused during the day because letting children play there blurred the boundary. It made the rule harder to explain. It made nighttime visits feel less separate. The fresh concrete paths and rubber mulch were part of maintenance, not renewal. The playground was kept safe because when the children went there at night, injury had to be minimized. By the time we moved away, I understood why no one reacted when my brother talked about laughter. They were not scared of it. They accepted it as something managed, not solved. The sign stayed faded. The rules stayed simple. No children allowed outside after sunset. It was not about punishment. It was about knowing that some things return if you give them a place, and that silence can be a form of control when explanation only makes behavior stronger.